Some opposition politicians in Ontario are calling for the suspension of a cabinet minister over reports of a profanity-laced outburst. It stems from a run-in at a Rolling Stones concert between Ottawa Senators owner Eugene Melnyk and Tourism Minister Lisa MacLeod. The CBC's Mike Crawley joins us from Toronto with the details. So, Mike, walk us through what allegedly took place here.
So yes, Katie, as you say, this happened at the Rolling Stones concert, which was last weekend in a field a little bit north of Barrie, Ontario, about an hour, 20 minutes drive north of Toronto. So Lisa MacLeod was there in her official capacity. She's Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport. She welcomed the crowd, and from what we understand, there's definitely some conversation between MacLeod and Eugene Melnyk, the owner of her hometown hockey team, the Ottawa Senators. So Melnyk told two Ottawa newspapers today that MacLeod called him, used the F word twice, called him a loser and a piece of shit. Now, MacLeod is not denying that this happened. She did go on Twitter today, put out a comment on Twitter saying that she, quote, gave Melnyk some feedback, and she also says that she apologized to him for, in her words, being so blunt. And you'll also see there that she has serious concerns about the state of the Ottawa Senators hockey team. And Lisa MacLeod is a big hockey fan. I've seen photos of her. I've seen her wearing her Ottawa Senators jersey in the legislature. No official comment. Couldn't reach MacLeod today. She wasn't answering her phone when I tried to reach her. And we did reach out to the Premier's office as well for official comment, and they say that her Twitter apology stands. Katie?
So what has the fallout been?
Yeah, so there are these calls, a couple of different calls. The Ontario Liberals are saying that she should be suspended from caucus and actually step down from cabinet, that this is not the kind of conduct that you should see from a cabinet minister. And also the NDP, one of the NDP members of the legislature had a news conference today. Here's what she had to say.
This is Mr. Ford's government. He is the premier of this province. He needs to make a call on this. And I would say he needs to set the bar a whole lot higher than this.
And no specific response from the Premier's office to these calls for resignation. So as it seems right now, Lisa MacLeod is continuing to be a cabinet minister. She has been one of the more controversial figures in the Doug Ford cabinet over the past year. She was previously Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, and that meant she was handling the autism file, which was a tough one for the Ford government. A lot of complaints from parents of children with autism around how she handled that, and she faced a lot of protests over that, and then got demoted as in the cabinet shuffle that happened earlier this month. Katie?
All right, Mike, the CBC's Mike Crawley in Toronto. Melnyk alleges MacLeod pushed her way through the crowd toward him and began berating him in a profanity-laced tirade. Melnyk complained to Premier Doug Ford about the incident, and MacLeod, for her part, took to Twitter saying she didn't deny it, saying she gave him blunt feedback. Is that enough? I'd like to put this to the power panel. Marty, I think you're reacting, so what do you think about this?
So about a week ago, someone called Lisa MacLeod a very, very, very bad word on Twitter, which is probably the most cowardly thing you can do in 2019, I think. So I will say this about MacLeod, regardless of whether or not, if she did indeed come out and say what she said to Mr. Melnyk, at least she did so to his face and not by way of a computer or an internet connection, which is, I guess, progress. The other thing I would say that if you are indeed doing this in public as a minister, whether or not alcohol was involved or what have you, that it's probably a sign that it's time to take a long summer break from what you're doing, enforced or not.
We have no idea at this point. We've asked, we and a number of other reporters at CBC News have asked MacLeod for an interview. We asked for a comment from the Premier's office, and we also reached out to Eugene Melnyk to sort of get more information on this and to talk to MacLeod to get more information beyond the tweet that she put out there. But at this point, those are the only facts we have, or that's the only information we have, and it's Eugene Melnyk's account of this interaction. Aaron, I want to talk to you. Given the controversy that MacLeod has already drawn in Ontario for what can only be described as a brutal handling of the autism file and the frustration she triggered in parents. Is it a smart move to sort of behave like this in public? If allegedly, if it happened like this?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, regardless of whether you've had a bad time or a good time as a cabinet minister, if you're a cabinet minister, you shouldn't be swearing at people in public. That's just
a truism.
I think that's one of the. I think that's in the guidebook.
I dare you to. Yeah, exactly.
But down here somewhere. Look, there are going to be people in Ottawa who are going to be very happy to hear that Eugene Melnyk was sworn at.
Yes, there are. That's
but
the thing.
Again, it doesn't. It comes back to the fact that it was a cabinet minister, and as you say, it was a cabinet minister who has had a rough ride already. This was supposed to be the summer where the Ford government rebooted and took it quietly and went away for a while and stopped causing the federal Conservatives trouble and maybe found its footing again. And it has been one thing after another. If anything, they can be happy that the swearing story is taking attention away from the another patronage appointment story. But that is the silver lining on a very dark cloud. This government just needs to get out of its way somehow. Maybe stop going out in public, and get a break, because this is just it's one thing after another, and it's the sort of story where. There are a lot of political controversies that can be hard to understand, that can fail to resonate. Cabinet minister comes up to prominent local businessman at a Rolling Stones concert and swears at them is the sort of story that will be talked about and noticed and will stick in people's heads.
Yeah, it's not complicated. It's not the SNC-Lavalin affair. It's not something that requires a lot of explaining. It is what it is. Jen, what do you make of the Ontario Conservative government that just keeps, it keeps its self-inflicted trauma in terms of the way that it's just self-inflicted political trauma?
There's no question at this point that the Ford government is in shambles, and I think that their approval numbers reflect that. But I mean, these are the types of stories that are really funny until they're not. I would say Lisa MacLeod has been at the face of one of the most brutal files in the Ford government, the biggest screw-up of the Ford government to date. I think the report that was leaked to the Globe and Mail last week from one of their own members definitively shows that the autism file was botched, dramatically botched, and Lisa MacLeod, being the minister at the time, owns that and is the face of that. At the same time, she's also been the subject to legitimate death threats. I believe one of them's now in front of the court. And, as a result of all of that, I think there are a lot of people who would be very strained under that kind of reality and pressure and under the type of pressure she's been under, and a lot of people who would struggle with that. At the same time, we're seeing, signs and more signs of what appears to be erratic behavior, and I think that is probably indicative of the fact that maybe she needs a bit of a timeout. Maybe she needs a break. Maybe she needs to be outside of the public limelight for a little while. For the Ford government in the wake of the autism report has obviously kind of quasi-demoted her to a much friendlier, happier portfolio tourism. I think she described that as like, this is before I was the Minister of Tears and now I'm the Minister of Cheers, and I have every reason to believe that she genuinely, sincerely believes that. But, if it still can't get around the fact that the Ford government chose to continue her in a ministerial role. And I think that, with incidents like this, perhaps that's a question that they should, or a matter that they might want to consider reevaluating.
You mentioned that report that came out last week in the Globe and Mail, and absolutely an internal report done by an MPP about how the government has handled the autism file and the frustration and the fears of parents of children who live with autism and the concerns that they legitimately had, and even the reports said that there was an effort to mislead the public on this. There's been a lot of outrage on that file. And so, Marty, I'm going to put the last question to you. Yep. When there are calls for Lisa MacLeod to resign over this, it's not a great thing, but when you compare it to the mishandling of the autism file, clearly they're not even remotely on the same stage here. Do you think that the calls for her to resign now are over the top?
I think look. If I was her, you're doing this twice in a row in the space of what, like 2 or 3 news cycles. I think at a certain point you have to realize that you're doing damages to your own government's already damaged brand. So no, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessarily out of the question that she'd be called to resign. Simply for the fact that, as Jen said, she botched this autism file, and yet Ford continued to invest sort of, his own personal currency in her.
He moved her to a less prestigious portfolio.
I know, but if you're botching the autism file the way that she did, I mean, and the other thing too is, like, I'm one of the people that sort of like took the Ford side on this. Like, what you do when you get into government is that you sort of backload all the bad stuff in the front of your mandate, then you're okay for the rest of the mandate. When Lisa MacLeod does stuff like this, as Aaron said, things like stories like where you go out and swear at a very prominent businessman in public tend to stick unfortunately a lot more than stories that have to do with autism and what have you. And I think that's the kind of, certainly when you're talking about a populist government like the Ford government. So this one's going to sting.
I suspect those parents who were challenging the Ford government are going to at least try to not let Ontarians forget about that. I bet that. All right, I want to thank the Power Panel today: Aaron Wary, Marty Patrickin, and Jen Gerson. And Jen, enjoy Stampede weekend out in Calgary.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.